This is Retro Games THE400, a mini recreation of Atari's first home computer that plays Atari games from all the 8-bit Ataris of the early 80s. So let's open the box to see what we've got for our money. There's a half-size version of the Atari 400, a colour-matched USB cable for power, and an HDMI cable also in Atari beige. You have to supply your own power supply though. You do get a joystick which does look very much like the original VCS joystick. To give you a sense of size, here's a mugshot, and here I am pretending to type on the tiny decorative keyboard. Hilarious. The original 400 wasn't the prettiest computer of the era, but this recreation is very cute. On the back we have connections for USB peripherals, HDMI video, USB power, and a power switch. On the front there are 4 USB sockets imitating the 4 controller connectors of the original. The joystick looks just like I remember from the VCS, but in addition to the big red fire button, the bezel has 4 switches. On the top there is a menu and a home button, not labelled, and a shoulder button. You can also configure the joystick to work in left-handed mode. Alternatively, you can use the Retro Games gamepad, but the on-screen button hints won't help you much. It takes about a minute to connect up, so let's switch the 400 Mini on. You have to make a couple of choices when you first power up, but you're soon into the main carousel screen, which, like other Retro Games units, is a colourful scrolling menu of games that you can sort by title, author, genre, year, publisher, or by your own favourite rankings. I can't resist having a go at the Atari arcade classic Asteroids from 1981, because I had this on my VCS back in the day. I would play it for hours and my friend Ian from Next Door But One would come round to play it too. Ian owns a pub now. The Atari that most people recognise is the very popular VCS, later known as the 2600. Released in 1977, it had hundreds of games made for his on-cartridge. The 400 home computer came along in 1979 with a membrane keyboard, 1 cartridge slot and 8K of RAM. It had a big brother, the 800, with a proper keyboard, 2 cartridge slots and 4 expansion slots for extra memory and upgrades. Both had 256 colours as 16 shades of 16 base colours and 4-channel sound, but the 800 cost about twice as much as the 400. The XL series of 1983 redesigned the case and had built-in BASIC rather than on cartridge, and a minimum of 16K RAM. The 5200 game console was the equivalent redesign of the VCS, but initially it didn't have compatibility with VCS cartridges. In 1985, the XE sported a grey case to look like a smaller version of the 16-bit Atari ST that was released at the same time. The Retro Games 400 has display options that give a retro feel, as you can have an old TV 4:3 aspect ratio or pixel perfect, and you can choose CRT effects and a frame border graphic. The CRT effect gives you that raster line rendering we can see here. There are 25 games included with the unit, each with a description. You can mark games as a favourite, sort the order as we saw earlier, or get help which shows you the controls for a game. Special Action shows some extra stuff, most interestingly, a rewind gameplay feature. Say I'm not happy with how I've played. I can go back 20 seconds and try again. In fact, you can go back up to 40 seconds if you really want to. If you drop out of a game back to the carousel, it stays paused so you can return to it, or you can save it into one of 4 slots. You can also add your own games by copying them onto a memory stick from a PC. I'm not going to go into that here because it's explained much better in the user manual that you can download. The cover page even looks like the original. Here's the section on loading your own programs. When you insert a correctly formatted memory stick, you get this icon on the carousel. In here we get a folder structure and the 400 BASIC. That means if you connect a standard USB keyboard, you can write BASIC programs on your Atari. Maybe type in a listing from your favourite mag.
I don't think so.
Or just experiment with writing code. Pretty awesome, I think you'll agree.
Yeah!
In the game settings for BASIC, you can choose the model. But I found I also had to put the display height to max or I lost the bottom line of text. If you're very lazy like me, you can get preloaded memory sticks like this one. It's split into folders for each model. But before you start a game, I suggest you check that the game settings has the right model selected. And then be prepared to wait a few seconds. One downside of using a stick of raw files is that you don't get the description or control instructions. There are loads and loads and loads of 400-800 games, so they're split into alphabetical subfolders. I like Galaxian, it's another arcade classic. With the 400 and 800 games, you often have to wait even longer, and it's easy to think it's crashed, but it usually comes back after about 10 seconds. However, there is a problem here. My ship is mostly hidden, just the gun pointing out like a submarine periscope, and at the top of the screen I can't read the score. But if we go into the game settings and experiment a bit with the display height and vertical offset, we can usually find a setting that's usable. So in general I like the 400, but I do find the controls a bit of a problem. For carousel games and settings you get on-screen hints, but you do have to think about what to press. With the gamepad that's even worse because the hints are useless. Maybe useless is a bit unfair. And isn't this just another Raspberry Pi emulator in a pretty case? Well, yes, it is an ARM-based system running an emulator. After all, you probably wouldn't expect it to have an actual 8-bit 6502 processor like the originals. And that case is so well detailed, with the raised borders on the keyboard and the recessed function keys on the right and the fake cartridge cover. It's also very easy to set up and get playing, and you get plenty of USB ports for various bits. It comes with some of the best games of the Atari 8-bit era, all with nice descriptions, screenshots and control instructions. And you can program in BASIC. But it's not the real thing. That means the keyboard isn't functional and you don't get to collect tapes or cartridges. But the components are modern, so you shouldn't have to worry about the power supply failing in a cloud of smoke because the 40-year-old capacitors have dried up, and you always get crisp graphics on a modern TV or monitor. Some people like to have the real thing, I do, but I also recognise that old electronics can be a pain, and in the UK it's quite rare to find a good condition original 400 or 800, especially compared to BBC Micros, Commodore 64s or ZX Spectrums. If you're enjoying this video, please do like and subscribe, it encourages me to do more. Now here's a quick montage of some of the games I've played with on the 400.
the humanoid, the intruder.
I'm glad Retro Games decided to replicate the quirky looking 400 computer rather than the VCS, which you could argue would be the more obvious and popular route. I remember seeing adverts for the 400 and 800 in magazines back in the day, but in the UK it wasn't as big as in the US, so I'm chuffed to have the opportunity to play with one now, even if it is half the size and not the real thing. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it.
Rather.